gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies. Look at
How's it, guys? Hello, hello, hello. How are you? How you all doing? Jeez, what happened? What happened to you this week or over the weekend? No, but listen, on a serious note, thank you all for being at the final installment of the Secrets of Scale event series. There's still some stragglers hanging out at the bar, you know, these winos these days. But yeah, so just to recap, this is the final event. How many of you have been to any of the previous events? Hands up. Okay, quite a lot of you, mainly on this side of the room. You guys have issues, okay? Especially you, Geron. Where were you last week? Alrighty, so we've had actually over 500 entrepreneurs through the doors over the last month or so. So it's just been a really rad journey. So I'm excited to conclude tonight's particular installment for the simple reason that we are not going to talk business. Ironic, eh? Considering you're here at a Secrets of Scale event. And the reason for that is, can we just close that door, bro? The reason for that is because, as you scale entrepreneurs, how many of you run your own business? Pretty much everyone, right? So how many of you would agree with me when I say that running your own business, being an entrepreneur is pretty damn lonely? Yeah? Okay, so that's why tonight's pretty cool. Because we're going to talk about the person, and I've got arguably three of the most insightful people in my network with us tonight, and I'm going to introduce them shortly. But before I do that, don't forget, Mesh Club is our host of the Secrets of Scale event series. Our media partner is Entrepreneur Mag. So just a quick thing about Mesh Club. What you're about to go through tonight is like business therapy for entrepreneurs, okay? And so we're launching a series of mastermind events. Masterminds literally are private, confidential forums which allow you to talk around about your business and personal positives and negatives and what you need help with. It's really an open forum. It's kind of like a mentorship group, but you do it with like-minded entrepreneurs with businesses of similar size, non-competing industries. So we are launching that. If you want to get part of that experience, I promise you, I've been running one for 2 years, and it's just made like the world of difference to me personally in my own business. So please check out meshclub.co/trial. Anybody who fills out that form will also stand a chance of being listed in Entrepreneur magazine in the September edition. Cool. So before we do that, I just want to give you the headlines around what we're going to be covering. So there's 3 parts. The first part here is the business of belief. We have Tom Asacker on the line from VC. Many of you can see him up on the screens here. Tom literally wrote the book, The Business of Belief. So we're going to talk around, how beliefs are created, how people get to essentially change the beliefs of others. If you're a founding member, how do you get a team to understand your vision and to believe in what you're doing, a la Elon Musk? We're going to talk around passion, perseverance, and performance. Words you would have all heard of before, but in many instances, is it really a big deal to be passionate about what you do? How do you develop and foster and cultivate passion as a founder? Perseverance, obviously, if you give up, you basically fail automatically. And we're going to talk about entrepreneur health. It's one thing that we don't actually talk about, right? We talk about strategy and product design and user interface and conversions and marketing automation and all this cool, sexy stuff, but we don't actually talk about the person, right? And how many of you would agree with me that running your own ship is the most stressful thing outside of getting married you'll ever do? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Okay, so then the final part of the show is all around 10x thinking. We know that 10x as a concept is very much in the DNA of Google. But in the context of scale, in the context of South Africa and growing and scaling your business, we're going to unpack what that means and how to apply the 10x rule in your business, and how to take massive action and all this cool stuff. So I'm incredibly excited about this particular show. So let's get some guests on. My first guest is none other than Howard Sacktien, the CEO of SAICOM Media Group. Round of applause, please. Cool. Our next group is actually a performance coach. Yes, a performance coach. He's also the founder of BetterMan, and his name is Erik Kruger. Please welcome Erik to the stage. Okay, and our final guest is none other than the 6-time international best-selling author, Tom Asacker. You're supposed to dance here, Tom.
Okay,
Howard's doing it for you, bro. Let me do it that way so you can at least catch Howard's face and some of the audience. Okay, cool. Where's Mav? Can we get the roaming mic? I just want to get some expectations. Let's start with Hiran, penalty for last week. Do you have any expectations for tonight?
Pretty open-minded, so blow me away, my brother.
Okay, cool. No pressure then, hey? Okay, cool. Why don't we go to, where's Cat Wolf? On this side? She's been here at every event pretty much and then not asked a single question. Penalties. I'm dishing out penalties. It is the last event.
I have no expectations, Maddie. I'm here with an open mind.
Jeez, okay. No pressure then.
I'm just so happy you decided it's the last event before you heard your 3 panelists speak.
I know, exactly. Cool, let's jump straight into it. So, Tom, I want to start with you. Not because you're the most important person in the room at all, but simply because you have literally written the book of belief and the role of belief in human psychology. So I'd like to start with you. How's it, Ivan, for checking on YouTube? We do have an online audience with us tonight. So, Tom, you literally wrote the book, right? The Business of Belief. So basically this was all around how the world's best marketers, designers, salespeople, entrepreneurs, fundraisers, educators, leaders, essentially, get us to believe in what we are doing. And if you're going to scale a business, you've got to be damn sure that your best asset, your people, believe in what you're building. Otherwise, that ship's going to fall apart mid-air, right? Or the plane, rather, to use a better word. So, Tom, what is the headline around that book? And just to cue that up, this was outside of America, South Africa. He sold more books, right, in South Africa than anywhere else. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Cool. So, what's the headline there, Tom?
The headline. Well, the headline is I wrote the book because I became very frustrated working with organizations to get their people to move to a different way of seeing the world and a different way of measuring and performing. And I finally came home from one trip. And after this was sitting with the CEO of a company, I had spent a week with them a year ago, and I came back to review their progress, and they hadn't made any at all. And they almost did opposite of what I was recommending. And I asked the CEO, what did I do wrong? And the CEO said, you didn't do anything wrong, Tom, but remember, when you left, people had to go back to their jobs. And that struck me as really an interesting statement. And so what I discovered is that knowledge is not what gets people to change their behaviors. So you can fill people with as much knowledge as you want. And all you're going to be doing is wasting your time, because what moves people is their personal desires. So if people don't have a desire for whatever it is that you're hoping for them to adopt as an idea, as a product, as a service, as an employee, if they don't have a personal desire for it, they are just simply not going to do it. Beliefs are driven by desires. They're not driven by knowledge. So that's kind of like the key takeaway. If there's one particular thing to take away from this, it's if you are not tapping into people's desires, your employees, your customers, your partners. There's nothing that you can say or do that will get them to come along for the ride. Just won't happen. Or you can try if you want and spend 20 years like I did, frustrated, trying to figure out why people don't change.
It's like innovation in the corporate space. Lovely to talk about, very hard in reality, right?
Well, because look, when you're trying to innovate in a corporate space, corporations, and this is what gives entrepreneurs and small companies, small organizations an advantage over big ones, is that people in organizations, their desire is to protect themselves, their status, their advancement, their movement, their relationships. It's not to innovate. It's not to create new value. They're always looking out for themselves and their own movement in the hierarchy of the organization. So that's what, if you want somebody to change their behaviors in an organization, you've got to figure out how to get them to be interested in that hierarchical change in those relationships based on what you're trying to do externally in the world. And it takes a lot to get that boat to shift. So small organizations have a huge advantage in being able to offer the market something a lot more quickly and make a lot more changes before the large organizations even sit down and have their first meeting.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to pick up on the word knowledge that you mentioned. So I think in today's world, like, knowledge about a product or service is not enough, right? It's nice, but it's not a game changer. And if you're going to basically scale, in other words, create a global organization, knowledge about a product or service is less relevant than the markets that you're serving believing in what you're doing. They have to believe in it. It's like Airbnb, right? SpaceX. It's like all the category of one brands are all doing this thing around giving the communities that they serve and the markets that they serve a completely real sense of belief in what they're doing. SpaceX, we're going to put a man on Mars, right? True or false? How many of you believe that they're going to do that, right? Like, I believe that, especially after that last stunt that they pulled where they put the Roadster up in space, right? Did you see that, Tom?
Oh, yeah. No, that's going to happen. There's no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not enough, right? So, but I want to explore belief in the context of markets first, and then in terms of you as an entrepreneur, right? So let's start with the markets first. And I'd like to start with you, Howard. Markets, getting them to believe in what you're doing. You know, I've got a room full of people here. Hopefully they believe in what we're doing here as part of Secrets of Scale. Otherwise, you're in the wrong place. But how does one, in the scale context, get a mass amount of consumers to believe in what you're doing as a brand?
So I think I'm going to answer a question that you didn't ask first.
Got it.
But I want to rephrase something that maybe I think Tom was speaking about, and that is your most important job in your position is to recruit number 2 and number 3 and number 4. And if you're looking for people who are just going to be employees, you may as well pack up your business now and go away. You're looking for evangelists who can join you in your mission. And you can always teach skill. And let's face it, in South Africa, there's an enormous lack of skill. But there's not a lack of enthusiasm. So, you know, we always say you hire for aptitude and for attitude. But the skill you can teach. You can never, ever teach someone who does not want to learn. And that's why being in the trenches, because I think all of us every day go to work and we sometimes believe we're in the middle of a war. And ultimately, you want to choose the team with you who you want at that moment of crisis. And therefore, recruitment and culture is the most important thing. There was a talk I went to many years ago. It was Stephen Kossoff and Brian Joffe. And they were talking at Investec. And it was like two grumpy old men over a Friday night dinner. And Stephen Kossoff said at that point in time, Investec had 3,000 employees. And the culture of every single person who joined Investec changed the actual business. And that's why someone went through 6 or 8 different interviews before they came in, because culture was that important to them. And Brian Joffe said, well, you know, you employ 3,000 people. I employ 120,000 people. There are enough people who can think. I don't need people who can think. I need people who will just go and do what I tell them to do. And so ultimately, I think each of us need to decide, are we running a business like the Bidvest, or are we running a business like the Investec? Do we want people who will just do what we tell them to do, or are we looking for people who will generally add value and add to the culture of what we're doing? And that becomes the most important thing. And that leads me to answer the question you actually did ask. And that is, if you don't have self-belief in your own product, you will never, ever convince anyone else that your product is worthy of being bought. Enthusiasm is infectious. So it starts with self-belief, and it starts with the belief that you're genuinely adding value to them rather than to yourself. And you just have to be able to communicate that value. You know, we sometimes think very much from a centrist perspective, you know, what am I going to do? But you have to put yourself in the position of the client and say, what value am I going to achieve out of this relationship? And you have to find the best way to communicate that value to that person.
Just to quickly bring Erik into the mix here. I mean, you coach business owners. What if I was to say to you, hey man, like I want to build Map Round Show into a global brand, you know, but I'm battling with getting my market to believe in what we're doing, you know, which is helping entrepreneurs succeed at scale through information sharing. Like, how would you approach consulting with me as a coach?
So I want to latch on to what Howard was saying, because my best experience with building something that resonates with people is BetterMan, right? And where it all started was just something very simple. I want to be a better man tomorrow than I was today. And just having that message, that's what people bought into, because they could resonate with the message. Irrespective of what I was doing, they wanted that too. And then after a bit of time, when I realized this was actually becoming a thing, and I became a bit more public and actually showed my face in the group and in my emails, then people bought into me. But that came after. So I think the first thing is to really find a message that resonates with people, to find something that's authentic to you and that you can then articulate and communicate in that way. Okay. So to come back to what Howard was saying, I think believe in what you have to offer, and people buy into that.
So it actually starts with you, right?
Definitely. And I think we see this in so many entrepreneurial journeys, that it's also something deep, you know, and like you can't articulate in the beginning. And then at some point it becomes something very simple. And then people can latch onto it.
Yeah, so just as a quick poll, how many of you believe in what I'm doing? Hands up. Yes. So that's pretty. I've won. You know what they say? Have a win every day. That was my win for the day.
But it's also fake it till you make it. You know something? No one knows if there are 10 people in the audience or 10,000 people in the audience. Now, it just so happens there are 10,000 people in the audience.
No, there's 10,000 people on YouTube, dude.
but you know, in the world of digital, and you look at,
keep the mic there.
If you look at some of the largest South African businesses, and you know, some of the largest online casino operators in the world are South Africans, and you look at their business, and they built an empire, and no one knew because it was all online. There was no way for, in fact, anyone to measure. So no one knows if you're successful. You know, the ability to use Google, for example, or to follow people who've gone to your website on Google through reproducing your ads. People think you're the largest company in the world. You know, today we're living in an era of smoke and mirrors, and if you believe in it and if you project that image, people will start believing too.
Yeah, that's such a great point. The only, if I'm going to be contrarian to that, I'm not disagreeing, I just want to add some more context, is that beliefs by nature are unconscious. Yes? So you don't know. It's like when you're little, right? You're playing rugby with your dad in the back garden, right? And you're trying to pass the ball and you basically fuck it up, right? And your dad goes, dude, you fucked it up, okay? Whatever. And so you have all these little experiences which you've forgotten. I forgot about that. This isn't a true story, but I'm just using it as an analogy. But I mean, you forget about it, right? But it sits there in your unconscious mind, right? And then as you grow older, you go through breakups, and then as you get even older, you decide to jump out of the nest and start a business, and then some of those fail, right? So you have mistakes in boardrooms when you're trying to get your first client and you don't land that client, and your ego gets crushed, right? And is this starting to make sense, right? And then suddenly, without you knowing, by virtue of the fact that you're a human being, you have an unconscious mind, and it sits there, right, or a subconscious, as a limiting belief. But now we've just landed the point that if you want to scale a business in a major way, it actually starts with you. Therefore, one could assume that your ability to scale a business is actually directly in proportion to your ability to scale, based on how much you believe in what you're doing. True or false? Right? You with me so far? Okay, cool. So let's talk about that. If beliefs are unconscious and you don't necessarily know consciously that you have these things until you're in it, and as again, it's like a reinforcing cycle. And maybe Tom, you can pick this one up, considering you wrote the book on this. but I mean, how does one go about identifying limiting beliefs in themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. If people could do that, there would not be anything called psychiatry or psychotherapy or anything like that, right? You can look at your behaviors, and your behaviors are pretty much a really good indication of your beliefs. So if you're not investing in growing your business, even though you know you should, then that's telling you something about what you really believe in your gut about what you have. They may not be true. You see, it could be true, it may not be true. That's the really interesting part about belief. And it's paradoxical, because you can believe in something as much as you want to. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen, right? The marketplace is a dance. It's an ecosystem. There has to be someone else out there that has this strong desire to dance with that belief that you have. I'll give you a quick example, a quick story to show you the lesson of how to and how not to approach this idea of belief in the marketplace. A little over 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I had an idea that I was going to help revolutionize the radio industry. I was writing for one of the American magazines that dealt with that particular media industry. I knew, because I could see it, that they had to step into the digital future rapidly. So I went out and I said, okay, I'm going to create this media platform that connects radio to the internet. It's a seamless experience. Consumers, customers, listeners will love it. I was absolutely sure of that. So I found a designer that did really elegant work. I didn't know, to the point that was made. I didn't know that this kid was living in his mother's basement with a couple of old computers from college. It didn't matter to me. I saw his work. I saw how robust and beautiful it was. I hired him. We get into building this platform for the radio industry. And at one point, he had it almost completed. And he said, how does it look? And this was about a 12-month process and a lot of money on my end. I said, it looks good, but I want it to look good in every browser that's out there that's being used. And he knew that I wasn't technically oriented around the internet. So he said to me, Tom, do you know how many browsers there are? And I said, I don't care. I said, I'm the customer. I want it to look good in every browser. And he hung up the phone. He was based over in the UK. And I didn't hear from him for a while. What he ended up doing is he set up two computers. He would launch something that he was doing in one computer. And then on the other computer, he would launch a version of a browser. And he would look at the screen at it. And then he would do it again, make a change, look at the screen, a different browser. And he was going back and forth like this, losing his mind, frustrated as hell. He didn't know if he was going to be able to finish this on time. And then because of his pain, he said, wait a minute, why can't I create a computer program that goes out and takes a screenshot of every browser, how my webpage looks? So he builds this thing only to help finish the project that we're working on, him and I. So let's fast forward now. I go out and try to release this product to the radio industry. Remember, not to the consumer. I believed that the radio industry needed this. They didn't want it. They weren't interested. They were living in a story of 1960s where they're the rock stars, the DJs are making millions. This internet thing is a passing fad. I ended up losing a hell of a lot of money on my side. This kid that lived in his parents' basement, he went out and showed some of his friends this idea that he developed about taking screenshots, and they liked it. And one of them said, can you do that with emails? can you go out and take a shot of all the different email clients so I can see what my email looks like before I send it out? He created that product. He's a multimillionaire now. So that gives you an example about being careful of your belief. I had a belief that someone needed something. He created something that someone desired, that they asked him for. I failed, even though I had a belief. He succeeded wildly with his belief because he found someone else that desired what he had. And he stepped on the gas once he found that and created a big business.
Cool story, man. Listen, Howard, you actually were instrumental in crafting the Constitution of South Africa, right? Is that true or false?
More the elections than Constitution, but I was involved a little in the Constitution.
Okay, cool. So it was the Constitution. Great.
I believe.
But I mean, I want to talk around that because I think that's pretty awesome, right? Just the fact that you were part of that legal team and framework that defined how we operate, in democracy post-apartheid South Africa. So, how did you approach breaking through that the limiting belief barriers of there's just so much legacy. Do you know what I'm saying with apartheid, and now you're trying to shape and design this future country. How did you approach as a team back then, if you can recall? Or are there any personal anecdotes that you can share that help contextualize how to break through beliefs and how to work with beliefs to create something truly amazing, like the elections even?
Yeah. So I left the country because I had army issues during the period of compulsory military conscription under apartheid. And I went to go study in Boston, and I came back to South Africa when conscription was over, and I saw an advertisement for the Independent Electoral Commission. And there was absolutely nothing in the world that I wanted more than this. I thought applying for that job would in fact be my full-time career. And I applied and I called literally every 2 days for weeks afterwards until finally someone said to me, well, we've had 1 million applications, so we've thrown away all the applications. And after persevering and calling every contact I knew, I finally got a job for 3 months as a legal advisor in the Mpumalanga branch of the Monitoring Directorate, absolutely obscure nowhere. And I arrive at work on my first day, and there are 100 lawyers all reading the newspaper. And so I sit there and I read the newspaper with 100 lawyers, and no one does anything. And I come back on the second day, and the same 100 lawyers are reading the newspaper again. And I go to find my boss and I say, look, I'm going to go to the Mpumalanga office, but they haven't really built it yet. Don't you have anything for me to do? And she says, you're the only one who's asked. And I said, well, you've got 100 lawyers working for you on the other side of that door. She said, yeah, but all they want to do is read the newspaper. And I said, well, I want to do something constructive until I go to Mpumalanga. And I worked till 2:00 that night and 3:00 the next night and through the following night. And on day number 3, I was promoted to head office. And about 3 days later, where I continued to work into the night, I was promoted to be the coordinator of the investigations unit in Gauteng. It was my second promotion in my first week of work. And by sheer luck, because I kind of met Judge Johan Kruger along the way, and he had some faith in me, I landed up not staying for 3 months, I stayed for 6 years. But I landed up as executive director of the IEC, and I was in my 20s. And the weight of the next elections, or much of the next elections, rested on my shoulders. And I worked every night and I worked every weekend for 6 years. And one day I was sitting in my office, and it suddenly actually dawned on me, they've made a terrible mistake. You can't trust the future of the country to a kid in his 20s. And when is someone going to burst through that door and actually say, I'm terribly sorry, but we didn't mean to give you all this responsibility. We need to give it to someone better qualified, better experienced than you are. And in that moment, I realized there was no one better qualified. There was no one experienced at all. We were building a country and building democracy from the bottom up. And if anything taught me how to scale, it was how to scale those first elections, because the IEC went from 0 employees in February in 1994 to 500,000 employees by the 27th of April that year. And it wasn't just to try get those people employed. You had to train them. You had to deploy them. You had to open up 30,000 different locations around the country as polling booths, and you had to ship equipment to those places. And no one had ever really done that in this country before. And it's the greatest privilege in the world to start a business with a blank slate, because you can design everything without any legacy systems to be able to do. And one of the most amazing stories is, one of the problems we had no idea where the South African population lived. No one had actually counted black people in South Africa since the 1950s. So we had no idea who lived where, how many people would arrive at each of the 30,000 polling stations. So we called in SA breweries. And we said, guys, based on your beer distribution, help us plan where the population resides. And so if those of you who were around in 1994, if you stood in a very, very long queue, it's because breweries didn't sell that many beers in the areas in which you live. But that ultimately, there are many election stories, but ultimately there were instances as well where people who had never worked together before suddenly were thrust together in an environment in really the early days of the post-apartheid era, trying to work together, never having known. And I'll just tell one very, very brief story, if you don't mind. I had a very big, burly Afrikaans prosecutor called Victor. And we got a call from Vereniging, an area of a farm worker, said, we being told by the farm manager that we're not going to, in fact, be allowed to vote. So I called Victor because I needed someone who spoke a decent Afrikaans to go speak to the farmer in Vereniging. And I said, I am teaming you up with Mohammed Judgebai, who later became a judge, was an advocate at the time. And I said, the two of you are going to go to Vereniging and you're going to say to this farmer, you are either going to go to jail or else you're going to let your employees vote. And Victor said, I'm not going in the car with him. And I say, why? He says, he's black. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, I've never been in a car with a black man before, and I'm not going to start now. I said, Victor, you're working on our first democratic elections. You have to have the belief and the understanding that we're trying to build a non-racial free society here. And Victor said, no, I'm not going to do it. I said, well, in that case, pack your bags and leave, which was a terrible problem for him because we were paying him double his prosecutor's salary. And he said, okay, he'll go in the car with Judge Bai. And Judge Bai said, I'm driving. And Victor went the whitest I've ever seen anyone go. And they get into a car and they come back about 3 or 4 hours later. And Victor calls me aside and he says, you do know Judge Bai's a genius. And I said, yes, I do know. He's an incredibly... He says, I've never spoken to a black man in my life before. And he said, not only that, he actually drives. And the key element of that is they brought back a piece of lead that they found on the farm that they went to. They had a fantastic time. The farmer, in fact, invited them onto the stoep, gave them cook sisters, told them everyone was going to vote. And as they were driving out, a farm worker stopped and said, I found this piece of lead by that chicken shed over there, and they won't let me go into the chicken shed. And they brought it back. We called over national intelligence. They raided the farm. They found a right-wing bomb manufacturing plant that had been used to blow up OR Tambo Airport when it still was Jan Smuts Airport, as well as offices in the middle of Johannesburg. And because Victor and Judge Bai worked together, they actually saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives in this country. So how do you break through that mindset? It is the humanity of people actually talking to each other for that very first time. It's putting people together who have never had a conversation together and making them talk about the things that are really dear to all of us. And we all want the exact same things in life. We want better futures for ourselves and for our kids. And we want a better country. And we want no corruption and no crime. And that's the sort of society we want to live in. And when we connect with each other on those levels of humanity, that's when we can really overcome anything.
Please, can I get a very big round of applause? Just such an amazing story. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that one. Erik, just over to you. Geez, where do you go from that? Do you have a story to tell?
I kind of know where I want to jump in. So, one of the most important lessons that I learned in doing my master's was someone said that human beings are meaning-making machines. And it was such an impactful statement for me. And we all know that over the years we ingrain these beliefs and we become a product of our environment and our thinking. But I don't think we ever really stop and think, where does it come from? And I say that, but then when I speak to my coaching clients, so many of them can pinpoint exactly where it started. So we think, like it's so convoluted. And sure, there are parts of it that is. But this afternoon, I spoke to 3 guys. All of them, where does it start? Their parents. My parents didn't approve of me. My parents told me I wasn't good enough. And those beliefs become ingrained, and they stick with us for years and years and years. And they're in the background, and we know about them, but we never do anything about them. And so I think the first thing is to have the courage, because ultimately what we're saying is that your belief and will ultimately scale to your business, right? And the limiting beliefs that you have will also limit your business. So if you know that this belief is there in the background, it's operating, then you need to have the courage to face it, number one. And number 2 is then to have an openness and to explore it. Because once you start tugging on one piece of the string, everything starts to untangle. And I find it just very interesting that so much of it actually stems from years and years ago, and we just never take the time to deal with it. You know, like when we talk about scale, it's very cool to talk about the big things and chasing goals and, 10x, it's cool. But we never deal with reality and the pressure and the stress and all of the things that are just real to human beings that we need to be able to cope with in order to ultimately get to scale. That's my 10 cents on belief.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think like when it comes to belief, what's actually real? Do you know what I mean? Because we're distorting stuff all the time. There's like, to get to the truth, I believe in this thing called triangulation, right? So if it's like if you have let's just say, like, the next show we're thinking about, it's called Brand Me, okay? It's all around personal branding. How do you brand yourself and your business and whatever? But no, I believe that that's going to be a cool thing for you guys to basically learn about, right? From the world's best branding experts. But is that true? Right, so triangulation would be me phoning Howard and going, hey man, listen, I'm thinking about doing this show called Brand Me, it's around personal branding, what do you think? And he goes, yeah, no, I think that's cool. I think it's really rad, I think it's relevant, whatever. I phone Erik, he goes, nah, it's a cuck idea, right? I don't think, and here's the reasons why. I then phone Kat, and she says, I think it's a good idea. And then why I'm walking you through that example is because you have to get to the truth. And you're only working with your own model of the world, right? Which isn't actually real. It's your model. But it's not real because it's not the same as Howard's or mine or Eric's, right? Or anybody else's in this room. So to get to the truth, you almost need to debug reality, right? And this is what you were saying. You don't know that you have these issues, these limiting beliefs, regardless of where they come from, until you're actually in a position where you're like, holy shit, I really suck at this. Do you know what I mean? And by then it's too late. So I want to come to you, Tom. There's this cool analogy that you use around changing beliefs, and it's really around crossing. I'm going to set it up, right? Then you can hit it out ballpark. Do it. But it's called crossing a long and rickety footbridge, and it's all around using that analogy to effectively change your own beliefs in your model of the world, but more importantly, the belief of the teams that support your business.
Yeah. So what I've discovered about belief, because belief is a desire. Right, it's driven by a desire. I mean, the word belief comes from an old English word, a leaf, which means to wish. So to have a belief, you have to have this wish for something in the future. Otherwise, why change what you're doing right now? So you think you're going to improve something. So I created a metaphor of crossing a bridge, a rickety bridge, across a deep chasm to get to this thing that's on the other side. So that's the thing that's pulling you. That's what you want. That's where you want to go. That's your vision of the future. As you start stepping across that bridge, you're looking for evidence that tells you that that bridge is safe, that it makes sense to keep walking across the bridge. And that's what happens with a lot of people when we're working with customers or employees or whoever. If we start sending signals out, mixed signals, fearful signals, anything that tells them this is not safe. They'll get off of that bridge. And the reason that they'll jump off of it really easily today is that people are just totally inundated with choice. They, as a matter of fact, they've got so much choice that it's starting to bother them that they have that much choice, right? They come home and they go, what's on Netflix? I don't know, too much. I wish someone would just tell me what to watch. There's too much on Netflix. It's the same in every category. So if I see something and I say, I think that can improve my life because you've given them, like Erik said, you have given them a message, an inspiring message that turns on their feelings for whatever it is that you're offering that will create an improvement in their life. Once that gets turned on, now their rational mind comes along for the ride and starts looking for trouble to make sure, is this bridge safe? Now, if you're selling something like a bottle of wine, a new kind of wine, and you want them to pick that up on the supermarket shelf, okay, sure. You have to know how to appeal to the aesthetic taste. How do you give them control over the purchase? How do you make the pricing such that their identity is in line with what they're picking up? But there's very little risk in grabbing a bottle of red wine and trying a new bottle. Now, ask them to adopt a new software system. Ask them to change their religious beliefs. Ask them to vote for a different candidate. Ask them something that's really tied to their sense of self and their particular story. And if they find anything that seems unsafe, unstable, they will tune it out and walk away from it. That's just the nature of what we're dealing with today. That's why it is really important to understand step by step how to influence and create belief so that you don't derail yourself without even knowing it. Because I've seen that happen all the time. And usually what you'll hear from entrepreneurs and executives is that the customer just doesn't understand that we're better. We have to give them more information. They just don't get it. But you see, they're not interested in your information. They want what it is in the future. They want an easy path to get there. They don't want any stress. They don't want to waste time. They want you to guide them there. And if you can do that, they'll come along with you. But if you can't do that, like I said, they'll go away and they won't even tell you why they went away. They just went away. Everyone's facing, listen, Facebook, they're losing teenagers. They're losing the young people in droves. Do they understand why? I don't know. We'll see. But that's the thing that you have to understand is that people are going to go to whatever is easier for them that they think is going to give them a better experience that supports their story about themselves. Because that's where all these beliefs are coming from, is the story of me. Who am I? And as an entrepreneur, that's the paradox. Because when you go out into the marketplace, you've got to get rid of this story of you as the business owner. Forget about your story. Go out there and do improv. Look at yourself as a scientist. You're doing an experiment. Understand that every one of these people that you see and you admire that people write stories about, none of them knew what the hell they were doing at all. They did not have any idea. If you think Jeff Bezos thought that he was going to start offering movies and making movies, he would lie to you if he told you that. He was trying to sell books. He was out experimenting, discovering, and then going in a different direction and pouring some resources into that direction. He didn't know what he was doing. He's doing improv, but he wasn't afraid to go out there and do it. What gave him the right to do this? Nothing. He just did it.
Yeah, love that story. There's another quote I like. I love the only thing that stops you from getting what you want in business is the story you keep telling yourself about why you can't have it. Right? Because it is all bullshit narrative, right? The thing that's running through. I mean, this has come up on my show like many, many times around just blockchain and cryptocurrencies and who's right. Like it's opinions. Like they're just like assholes. Everyone's got one. You know what I'm saying? But who's actually right? But then more importantly, it doesn't matter. To your point.
Right.
Exactly. So I want to go to Erik, if you don't mind, just around I mentioned earlier, like you can only grow a business to the extent that you grow yourself. So you're the coach in the room. I mean, let's talk about what a growth mindset looks like, because I think that's a fertile ground that anyone can relate to and resonate with. I mean, how would you describe a growth mindset?
I would actually say we heard this word twice tonight: openness. Right, like an openness to new experiences, an openness to what Tom was saying, to experimenting, to trying, to failing. And I think, like lately, something that's been on my mind quite a bit is that we have to be sensitive to nuance. So we live in a world with just so much information, right? Like there are just so many ways to do the same thing. And I think someone who, at least when I look around me, the people who succeed and who do really well are the people who are able to take all the information that they get, to contextualize it very well, to understand the nuance that's really in there, and then apply it, and then, again, see what the outcome is, improv, and move forward. So it's, to me, openness, I think, is the word that best describes it.
Cool, I love that. That's better. I love that. Howard, what are your views on that?
Look, I think we have to all admit we're sitting in this room because we're crazy. Because we see things that no one else sees. And ultimately, we're either right or wrong, and it's not going to stop us seeing that vision. It's just whether we can get other people to see the ghosts that we ourselves see out there. And we have to understand that when we go out and sell, we're selling not just our businesses, we're not selling just our products, we're selling ourselves. We're trying to get someone to take a leap of faith. And the greatest challenge that I think we all have as entrepreneurs in all of our businesses, we always say no one gets fired for employing IBM. But they do get fired for taking a chance on someone who's unproven, untested, new technology. That's what creates the danger and the fear within our clients, that they're making the wrong mistake in trusting us. And our challenge is now, how do we sell ourselves in a way that we're no longer that risky business to the customers that we see? And I don't think there's a right answer, but part of the answer is the fact that referrals are the most important thing in all of our businesses, as small startup businesses, as new technology, because they need a reason to be able to trust us. And it doesn't just come from ourselves, it comes from other people's experiences in dealing with us. If you can get your other customers to tell a passionate story about you, in order to convince your clients, they'll probably be better salesmen than even you will be in your own business.
So my name is Declan Williams, and my business is Flowponics. We're a startup. We're still very much in the early stage. There's just 2 co-founders, and we are aiming to put hydroponic farms inside shipping containers and put them right at the point of sale to eliminate the cold supply chain. I love the whole series. Every Monday I was able to get here. Granted, I was late, which is why Matt punished me quite a bit. But otherwise, I pitched this weekend, and it forced me a lot to think about how am I going to present myself, how am I going to convince people to see where this business is going to be in the future as opposed to where it is now. So instead of telling people what I'm doing now, where am I going to be in 5-10 years time? So it really gave me some perspective of think forward instead of thinking now.